You own Chuck Pierce Doherty. Chuck the Doherty.
Gurmaigad a Chian Corlia, agus in an hospital fod na States bín óthar a bhfuil cuam préine nó éigindala de dhéharú foice agus ag fanart fá wirin ta fada gan leapa agus chrália fod hospital. Agus in bhfuilimiid inné farahí ort mo seart blianana de ís farachai céad wir in inad éigindala in hospital lumní agus tá seo scanealathe. Agus an rialta seo ag chip óthar agus ag chip foran at ag obair an hospital. Tánaiste this morning, Professor Conor Deasy, President of the Irish Association of Emergency Medicine, commented on the ongoing scandal in emergency departments. And what he had to say, Tánaiste, should be sending shockwaves through government buildings. He described what he called a dreadful situation for patients who are waiting on care. He raised the difficulties that staff are facing to provide that care that they are entitled to. Professor Deasy said that these patients deserve to be in a hospital bed, a ward bed, and instead they're being accommodating on the corridors in those wards. And of course he's right. Describing the situation at Cork University Hospital, he has said that people seem to have become immune to the level of overcrowding in the hospitals, saying that it is costing lives, Tánaiste. He's telling you that it is costing lives. And Cork University Hospital, which you know well, is operating at 300% capacity this morning. That is utterly scandalous. Patients in need of urgent and emergency care are languishing for hours on end. Some are putting off even going to the hospital at all. We heard earlier this week of the case of an 87-year-old man in Limerick. He was left waiting for 100 hours in the emergency department. And you and your government don't seem to care. Don't seem to care that this is happening on your watch and it's getting worse. Because the reliance on trolleys has continued every single year since you were a Minister for Health, and it has gotten worse year by year. The INMO yesterday said that overcrowding is leading to very dangerous situations. And the situation persists and worsens in hospitals right across the state. Laura Durkin, she's a consultant rheumatologist at Beaumont Hospital. She's also the former Vice President of the Irish Hospitals Consultants Association, and she described how admitted patients are in every corner of the hospital. That, in her words, there is no corner in the hospital that isn't at the moment housing an acutely unwell patient that has been admitted from the emergency department. Tánaiste, the facts and the reality are that you have abandoned patients and workers to this emergency department chaos. They are in a dangerous system because of your government and your Minister for Health's government's policies. The crisis has been caused by your decisions, and I have no confidence in your government's ability to tackle the trolley crisis. You have missed your waiting list targets, you have missed your trolley targets, you have stopped the health service from the funding it requires to recruit the frontline staff that it needs, and you are stumbling from one disaster to another, and the consequences are the 87-year-old gentleman in Limerick and the hundreds of others that are languishing on trolleys and chairs in an emergency department. The fact is we need 1,000 more hospital beds right now. We need 1,500 more beds by the end of next year, and at least 2,500 additional beds by 2030, according to the ESRI. We need a strategic workforce plan to train, recruit and retrain health workers. To tackle overcrowding, we need a multi-annual plan. Do you have one? Of course you don't. So we've heard many announcements of plans for new beds, but you have decided not to fund them in the recent budget. Indeed, you went further and underfunded health this year because you've thrown in the towel. So can I ask you this question? Because your government is simply incapable of getting the basics right. Will you reverse the disastrous decision not to fund the additional beds that are required and immediately approve the funding for those beds that our hospitals desperately need?
Ní ein tíim leis an hachta agus adavim dús go bhfuil an hospidéal agus nádid ag an dála fíomhrú fí láthair ach tá plan ann. Agus ní plan géirigh ann inis is plan an bhilíon fad. Tá inistíocht fí le corthaíteach na hospidéal na tíre seo ó tháinig an bhillte seo ar an bhód. Inistíocht fí le. Ní raibh le héad inistíocht ann le blianta fada. Sin fianna an scéal. The investment in health has been unprecedented in the last 4 years. 7.1 billion since 2019 extra. So don't be sort of saying no one cares or people have thrown in the towel. No, that is not correct, Deputy. We need a reasoned, balanced, rational debate. Not just shouting and roaring and getting angry and accusing people of bad faith. That's a 51% increase in less than in about 3 years. That's an extraordinary investment. Now, yes, on emergency departments, there has been very significant pressures on emergency departments. But trolley numbers have come down by about 22% nationally. What is critical is patient flow within hospitals and discharge policies. And I know that HSE has been in touch with Cork University Hospital in respect of patient flow and discharges. And there's been some improvements in that. We saw at Waterford Hospital how locally approved and applied policies had a very effective outcome in respect of delays. No patient should be 100 hours on a trolley. And that can't be just apportioned to a national allocation of funding. There are, in my view, no elderly person should be 100 hours on any trolley. And there's issues there that are not just about national allocations of funding. We do need reforms in how patient flow and discharge is managed. And in addition to that, we do need extra capacity, but we have increased ICU capacity by 25% since we came into office. And we have increased beds, and there's very significant capital proposals and projects in the pipeline for Cork University Hospital in terms of the surgical hubs, in terms of the new paediatric unit. We've already had significant investments in that hospital in respect, and we need to do more. And we have received proposals in respect of a number of significant projects, including trauma, which we approved. And this government, for the first time, have a major trauma investment programme, which has included Cork University Hospital, along with the Dublin hospital, because Cork is the major trauma centre and one of the largest in the country from that perspective. So we will continue to invest. And just to say, Deputy, I mean, again, the OECD looked Health at a Glance report, comparing Ireland with other EU member states. We ranked second highest in the OECD for practicing nurses per 1,000 population, and 12th highest for practicing doctors per 1,000 population among 25 participating EU member states in 2021. And that figure has gone up since in respect. So we do need to have this debate in perspective. Very substantial resources have been allocated to health. The population has increased, I acknowledge that. But along and parallel with increased resources, we've got to consistently look at how we organise our hospitals and in terms of ensuring reforms across the board into the future.
Minister, I will say that you don't care. Because a government that did care would actually listen to what the ESRI says and says we need 1,000 more beds now. The Department of Health have a plan for those beds. The problem is that government made a decision, of which you're part of, not to fund those beds. There's no way you can slice that up or dice it or spin it around. You made a conscious decision not to fund the additional beds. And then you say nobody should be on a trolley for 100 hours. The reality is, in many of these hospitals, the bed capacity is simply not there, and you are making conscious decisions not to allow the department who've gone out to tender to actually ensure that these beds are in our hospitals in the future. So you can't have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways, because this rests on your shoulders. You've missed your targets in terms of trolleys. You've missed your targets in terms of waiting lists. You're blocking the funding for the additional beds the department wants to deliver. That is the reality of it. Professor Conor Deasy, not Sinn Féin, is saying that this is costing lives. Other professors are telling us that our hospitals are running at 300% capacity. On your watch, your hospital in your county is running in that, and you tell us that you're doing everything. You're not. What we need is a multi-annual plan. What we need is your government to allow the Department of Health to actually fund those beds that are needed. What we need is your government to lift the recruitment embargo to ensure that the staff that are needed in our hospitals are actually recruited. That's a government that cares. So I put it to the test, do those three things, and then I'll stand up and say, yes, this government does care.
First of all, your analysis is wrong, actually. You need a multi-dimensional approach to healthcare. You're falling into the old trap. It's all about tertiary hospital capacity for you. But actually it's not. It's an important part of it. It's about building up community care. It's about building up primary care. I attended Ballincollig Primary and Community Care Centre 2 weeks ago. Fantastic multidisciplinary facility dealing with eye diagnostics and treatments, dealing with mental health treatment, dealing with chronic illness, dealing with a whole range of disciplines, which will prevent people in the first place.
You're not the leader, Deputy.
Keep quiet, Deputy Gould.
Deputy!
Keep quiet. You're not,
Deputy! Deputy Gould!
Deputy Gould.
Sorry, Tony. Deputy Gould! Deputy Gould! Deputy Gould! Deputy Gould! Deputy Gould, kindly, do not disrespect the chair. Do not disrespect the chair. Will you please have the good manners to listen to the reply to the question posed by your acting leader?
It's a well-worn tactic to interrupt me every time I respond. There was very significant investment in Grána also in terms of primary care and enhanced community care. Very significant investment. And we have to be very careful that we don't lose out on the huge momentum that has been built up in terms of community and enhanced care and primary care, because that ultimately helps you to keep patients out of emergency departments. Many patients can be treated through these services in a much more effective way, working in an integrated way with the hospitals and with tertiary care. And there's no question about that in terms of outpatient care, in terms of various treatments that can be done, and in terms of chronic illness. We've increased the number of beds by over 1,000. Now, CUH 2 or 3 years ago was a bit slow in making submissions on capital projects. There's new governance there now. The projects have come in. And I just want to say this to you, Deputy. You don't have to lecture me about Cork or investment at Cork Hospital. I was the Minister for Health. It's the only hospital on the ground that has a maternity hospital on site with a tertiary hospital because of the investments that I made over 20 years ago, along with a lot more as well.
Okay, thank you. Please, Deputy. Now, we go to Deputy Holly Kearns, please.
Last night, this government voted against supporting South Africa's case against Israel in the International Court of Justice at the earliest possible opportunity. Instead, you amended the Social Democrats' motion to say the government will only consider supporting the case at some point in the future. We now know the preliminary ruling is due tomorrow. But even then, you've said you won't act, that your decision will only be made after South Africa submits its substantive case. So am I right in thinking that it could take 6, 9, maybe 12 months for you to make up your minds? Taoiseach, people want to know what's going on here because you've not been slow to use the word genocide before. Less than 2 months after Russia invaded Ukraine, you accused it of genocide. You did this while you were Taoiseach. You made an assessment that there was a risk of genocide and demanded Russia be held to account, and it was. The Irish government worked with the international community to freeze bank accounts, impose trade sanctions, and set travel bans. The sanctions against Russia were rightly agreed within weeks. What consequences has Israel suffered for its actions in Gaza? Can you name even one? I listened to you speaking earlier this week and you said Israel has to be held to account. Taoiseach, in what way? By who? Because every time the Social Democrats and others have suggested ways your government could hold Israel to account, you refuse to act. You won't indicate support for South Africa at the International Court of Justice. You won't refer a case to the International Criminal Court. You won't lobby for economic sanctions at EU level. You won't withdraw the diplomatic status of the Israeli ambassador, and you won't pass the Occupied Territories Bill or the illegal Israeli settlement divestment bill. Taoiseach, I'm asking you to please not use your time to explain to me what the ICJ is and how it works. I know that. I'm asking that you signal your intention. I'm asking that you signal your intention and start the preparatory work to intervene now, because we all know you don't signal your intent and walk into the ICJ tomorrow. There's a lot of work that goes on in advance of that. And when bombs are being dropped indiscriminately in densely populated areas, when there's a man-made famine and aid can't get in, when 250 people are being killed every day, there's no time to waste. This wait-and-see approach is not proportionate to the atrocity that is unfolding in front of our eyes. It's not reflective of the strong feeling around the country, and it's not even representative of your own words on this issue. Taoiseach, I've welcomed this government's and your strong words of condemnation against Israel's massacre. What everyone wants to know, though, is will you match those words with actions, not at some undefined time in the future.
Thank you, Deputy. Time is up.
I have 3 questions. Do you believe a genocide or a risk of genocide is occurring in Gaza? Can you explain your divergent approach to Russian and Israeli war crimes? And how is this government going to hold Israel to account?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
First of all, we did not decide last night not to join the South African case. That is misinformation and that is disingenuous. And that spin is wrong. And second, I would make the point that we have been very consistent in calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. One of the first European Union countries to come out and call, rightly so, for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and for unimpeded aid to go into Gaza, which is the 2 most urgent things that have to happen. And thirdly, the release of all hostages that have been held by Hamas. Those are 3 very, and then to get into a political peace track. The Deputy asked the question and then tried to tell me how to answer it. I don't propose to go down that line, because I do think there is a fundamental disingenuous approach being adopted by the opposition in respect of this case and this issue. First of all, you said, how is Israel held to account? In the courts. We're already before the International Court of Justice. Ireland has already submitted a legal submission in respect of Israeli occupation of the occupied territories, West Bank and so on. The Attorney General will be participating in a full hearing in February. I oversaw the submission of a very robust legal case that we have made to the court in respect of the breaches of international humanitarian law that we believe has happened in the occupied territories. So Ireland is active before the courts where accountability matters. And likewise, we have supported the International Criminal Court in respect of the case that Palestine has taken against that court, and we've followed it up with funding, significant funding, which is what the prosecutor wanted. And we gave an additional $3 million to the court to enable the court to have the resources to deal with that case and other cases that is dealing with. And that case is active, and they are prosecuting all actions from the 7th of October until now. And in respect of South Africa, no country has joined. No country has joined. But no country has joined. So this idea that we haven't joined it or we're voting, that's wrong. It's false presentation. It's creating false, through the chair, it's creating false perceptions. It's as if people in here want to say, outside people looking at Ireland say Ireland's pro-Palestinian state. That's what people see about Ireland. But we're having an internal debate here, trying to say, well, the parties over here are more virtuous than the parties over here in terms of how much we care about the cause of Palestine. It's very cynical. And it seems to be more about leveraging electoral and political advantage for yourselves than it does about an objective and rational assessment of how we proceed. So the point is this in terms of intervention. You cannot intervene until you know the basis of the case. Our approach to this is exactly the same as our approach to Ukraine. Because Ukraine were refuting allegations by Russia that it had committed genocide in the Donetsk and those regions as a basis for Russia's invasion. Ukraine were refuting that. We joined them then, months later, by the way, following the preliminary hearings by the court.
Speaking down the clock and talking about how I'm apparently being disingenuous, I think really says it all, because Taoiseach, I literally said at the beginning, you voted down our motion calling on the government to intervene at the earliest possible opportunity. I literally highlighted in my speech just before you spoke that we mean starting the work now, that you don't signal your intent and walk into the ICJ tomorrow. There's preparatory work that needs to take place. We're calling on you to do that now, to intervene at the earliest opportunity. You amended it to say that you might intervene at some undescriptive time in the future. So I wasn't disingenuous, word for word. That's what our motion said. You amended it. Talking about the government's actions, when I ask you that the only thing you can point to is to secure travel bans for violent settlers, I just want to give people an idea how relatively inconsequential that is. Americans introduced those bans at the start of December, and that would be one of Israel's biggest allies. So it's hardly a legitimate action in the grand scheme of this entire situation. So Taoiseach, it's clear you're not going to answer the questions that I've asked you. I'm just going to go back to one thing.
Time is up, Deputy.
Please answer this. You said without hesitation, without equivocation, that there was a genocide happening in Ukraine. Will you use that same language to describe what's happening in Gaza,
Deputy.
or not?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Just to go back on that case. States that consider they have a legal basis for intervention in the ICJ must seek the court's permission to intervene, okay? This is typically done in all cases. Nothing new is happening here. It's typically done after the court has made any provisional measures, orders, and the court are now saying it will deliver that tomorrow, right? And what are the provisional measures that South Africa have sought? An immediate ceasefire, unimpeded humanitarian access, all of which we agree. We agree with everything that South Africa have sought from the court in terms of provisional measures. We've been seeking these in advance. Then South Africa has to file a memorial, which is the substantive case. I hope that we anticipate they'll share that with us. That then provides the basis for us to legally intervene, because this isn't the court is not a political chamber. It's not a debating chamber. It's about arguments that speak to the convention and that enable us to actually successfully prosecute a case at the convention. And that's the distinction we are making, and that's exactly what we did. We intervened in Ukrainians' refutation of Russia's aggression of genocide against Ukraine. We intervened 5 months after the provisional hearing was provided. I'm extremely concerned in what's going on. And I've already called out the announcements by 2 Israeli government ministers, which I believe were genocidal in their content in terms of calling for displacement of Palestinians and the elimination of Palestinians from Gaza. I just answered it.
Thank you. Deputy Verona Murphy, please.
Well, Taoiseach, I wasn't going to bring this up today, but as we are in the year of elections, and today we've announced the wording for a referendum to take place on the 8th of March, and particularly in light of the last leader's questions where we're being someone or anyone is disingenuous or we're talking about falsehoods. The question people are asking today is what's our political leaders and party leaders' stance on the individual and community-based fake profiles that are on our social media platforms. And I think it's actually staggering the amount of fake profiles that are now evolving, both as individuals and as community-based profiles. And I think the policy is what we're asking for, Taoiseach. What's Fianna Fáil's policy in relation to potential candidates or already elected Fianna Fáil representatives who are using fake profiles, either individually, community-based profiles, or both, to promote their electability at the expense, in many instances, that have been reported in what is now criminal acts under Coco's law, and defamation in civil law. So I think the question people are asking is, do you, as the Taoiseach and the leader of Fianna Fáil, condone candidates who hide behind fake profiles? Do you agree that a core issue for any elected representative must be honesty and transparency? And what sanctions, Taoiseach, would you deem fit to any elected or potentially elected representative, potential candidate, I should say, who is found to use fake profiles? What would the sanction be from your party if you were to become aware, or if you are aware, of Fianna Fáil candidates who hide behind individual or community-based profiles in this regard. Thank you, Taoiseach.
Thank you, Deputy.
Well, first of all, Deputy, if you're suggesting somebody is, maybe you should call it out if there's validity to it. I would more generally think public representatives should be upfront and transparent in their communications. In my view, no public representative, or indeed political party, should be creating a bot machine or a whole series of approaches which facilitate trending and creation of false news or misinformation. And then there's a balance in whatever legislation emerges between the right to free speech, the right to debate and proper debate, and the right to avoid undermining our democracy and undermining our electoral system. And that is why the Electoral Commission, which is now established, was given specific powers in respect of online manipulation, online misinformation about people and about politics, particularly in the context of a general election campaign, where the chance for an individual or a political party to respond is limited and the damage can be done before polling day if fake profiles were put up or if misleading information was put up in relation to policies or initiatives. We saw that in the United States election, the emails around Hillary Clinton at the time and the outrageous false allegations that were made in respect of Hillary Clinton, which gained traction during that election. So that we have given powers to the Electoral Commission to, at a minimum, call out any untoward action that would be wrong and that could influence people in the wrong way, and particularly in terms of trending stories and so on like that. I mean, I've had a recent case where I was, in particular advertisements, for example, I was portrayed as supporting some investment product. What concerned me was I had to go to the courts to seek an order from Google as to who was behind those ads. No one should have to go to court to find out who is behind advertisements or material that is defamatory of an individual in the first instance, but secondly could mislead ordinary citizens into losing their money or investing in false products or products that would be scams or whatever like that. And this is an evolving situation, generally in terms of the issue that you raise. To come back to your fundamental point, we're elected public representatives. We shouldn't. I don't understand the rationale for why anybody would want. Because normally it's the opposite, if I may say so. And most people here are not shy, seeking publicity and making sure that their photographs and titles are in the press releases or in the various postings that are online. It's a new departure. Well, I can understand maybe some people might want to try and do something behind the scenes. That's not right. In my view, public rep should be transparent, upfront and open.
Murphy.
Thank you, Taoiseach. I think the only question that was asked was, did Fianna Fáil have a policy with regard to their own elected representatives, which you didn't tell us what it was, but that's what people want to know. Is there a sanction for your elected representatives? I mean, you said yourself you were the victim of such a profile and you had to go to the courts. So, I mean, would it not be best to start at home with your own elected representatives and tell the people what the sanctions are for Fianna Fáil candidates who are already elected, those who are going to face the electorate, what you do as a party to sanction those people? Because in a time where, as a party, you are supporting the hate speech bill to sanction literally society with regard to what your potential candidates and elected representatives are purporting and spewing online, hiding behind individual and fake community-based profiles. So I think people want to know what Fianna Fáil will do with their own, what your policy is as a party to keep your own elected representatives in line and keep society in line in that regard. Because if you're promoting the hate speech bill, it's pretty disingenuous, as my colleague already you've accused of being disingenuous. It's disingenuous to try and blame the wider society in a hate speech bill when we can't start at home.
Well, thank you, Deputy.
It's the policy of Fianna Fáil with regard to sanctions.
Sorry, I'm representing the government, by the way, not just the Fianna Fáil party here this morning in respect of government policy. But Fianna Fáil have a social media policy, an ethical frameworks governing social media policy. If you had bothered to ask me as leader of the party, I would have provided, I would have provided you with that. And we have a disciplinary process as well. If anybody violates that policy or undermines people in an untoward and unacceptable way, we have a disciplinary process to deal, like I hope all parties have. And as I say, it's an evolving situation. But if you have a specific, because you've laced your contribution with innuendo, and it's a very difficult sort of situation to reply to, I don't know what you're talking about in terms of specifics. I have no idea what you're alleging, who you're alleging it against. You've just thrown something out there into the ether, which is not a very honest way of doing things either. I mean, if you have a problem with a particular person, say it to me. Say it to the Fianna Fáil party. I take on other. We would have commented on other tweets in the past about situations which we found unacceptable. It happens across all parties and individuals, and there is a policy there, and there is a disciplinary process to deal with it.